So, Bri, you know, when we first started talking about this show, some of the most important issues that we were talking about was all about dietary supplements and about the body. But I think my favorite part of the conversations when we were leading into the discussions around the show was about the idea of mind and spirit.
Yeah.
And how important that is, and that we forget about it. You know, the mind, body, spirit, all three. If the body's healthy, but the mind, you know, if you have stinking thinking, you know, you're just a negative person, you're not going to be healthy, you know, in the spirit of Patch Adams, you know, like it's like laughter is the best medicine kind of thing. Well, this last segment of every show, we're going to dedicate specifically to mental health because I think it's really important. And I know our conversations were really awesome the other day. So I really enjoyed those.
Nah, for sure. I could tell you without getting too far in the weeds, having a good mental state, thriving in a mental mindset of optimism and positivity and silver lining outlook consciousness. Like I practice this on a daily basis, and it has helped me from what was a rock bottom of personal relationships, financial hardship, legal matter, those big three. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to do in the moment.
Yeah.
But it actually changes it because happiness is a conscious decision.
Oh yeah,
so,
no, without a doubt.
Yeah, but it's so important.
You know what's crazy is too, is if you look at social media today, they even have a name for it, doom scrolling. I mean, people are just scrolling and being constantly shown what they're measured against. And I mean, right now the stats are 25% and in some regions as high as 50% increase in anxiety in the last 5 years. I think because we're starting to push a culture of self-reliance and lacking worth, and that they're not relying on anything else. They're so intently focused on things that are dangerous, and it's actually pretty unhealthy. What's also sad is suicide is growing, and that's it brings me to kind of a little bit of a hard thing to talk about, and I know you were close to him too. You know, this segment of the show on mental health is being dedicated to my best friend in the whole world, Jason Temisto.
Beautiful.
You know, 2 years ago, he made the ultimate decision to take his life.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't, that was pretty rough.
Yeah.
You know, him and I went to school together. You know, you got to work with him at Country Life when I brought him in. It was kind of cool.
Of course.
You know, that, and this is a person that is completely, I mean, he was one of the strongest guys I knew. You knew him. I mean, his attitude on everything was pretty amazing. And to lose him too early like that was not okay. And so that's why I think we really need to focus on mental health. I think we need to talk about it, and we need to not be afraid to touch on some of the tough topics, things that are driving us apart as a society, whether it be politics or medicine or this or whatever, it doesn't matter. We should be unafraid, unapologetic to help people make sure that there's a way to approach mental health in a positive way.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm glad you mentioned it. I remember the last time I spoke to Jason, probably a few months before the tragic ending. He was very stressed about work. He was having a hard time with change. Yeah. And I had gone through a great deal of it. So I was talking to him like, man, you will make it through. And I kept preaching to him, there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
But like, it sounds so cliche, but if you're not ready to hear it, and he wasn't, unfortunately, it could have taken a different path. So.
Well, he only had two speeds. It was 1,000 miles an hour or 0.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the end, he just made the ultimate decision. So mental health is kind of an important thing. And what's key, though, is we're not going to talk necessarily about supplements here. We're going to talk about things that honestly are free in many cases, that are free. Things you can do at home, strategies that you can put in play that'll make a difference. You know, the one that I focused on, that I wanted to focus on today was deep breathing. You know, we forget about this. We breathe, it's almost automatic. We breathe.
So important.
We have a brain that tells us to breathe all the time, but we don't necessarily do it properly. You know, we only use about 1/3 of the capacity of our lungs. 2/3 of our lungs that we don't use very often are the most efficient for bringing oxygen into the body. And so, you know, I was reading this article about how important deep breathing is. You know, we're sitting at our desks behind computers, we're talking to people, we're stressing out, we're doing all this, but we're breathing so shallow that we're not even oxygenating properly. It's actually pretty crazy. What's interesting though, is in this article, it showed that by simply pausing, being conscious about breathing deeply, And I don't know if you ever had parents like I did. They were like,
Stillness.
take a deep breath. You know, like when you get out of hand.
Of course.
There's a reason, because there is a response that your body has. Your blood pressure goes down.
Yep.
Your heart rate goes down. The tension and stress begins to leave your body. You begin to center in a place of peace. It also helps to strengthen the muscles of your lungs. It actually helps deal with anxiety. I mean, literally the exercise of deep breathing can lower anxiety.
Okay, I didn't even realize you were going to touch on this. I'm glad you are. So I don't know if you have any type of meditation practice, but for me, I meditate every morning, and it's all about deep breathing, just staying still, right? The space between the thoughts.
Yeah.
And what that does to anxiety and stress is unbelievable. Or I don't know if you ever practiced yoga. I started that a few years ago, and it was I thought it was about I want to get lean and elongate my muscles. It was all about the breath work, and it's incredible what it does to mindset.
Well, you know, at my church, my pastor, actually, when I picked you up at the airport this morning, my pastor was praying for me right then and there. Greg, you probably heard the tail end of it.
I heard you say bye, Greg.
Yeah. So, okay, he literally, you know, said amen right there. He was praying for me, and we went through this exercise where you take a couple deep breaths, and he has these really cool things where these meditations. My wife and I started doing them in the morning.
Good for you.
They're like 7-8 minutes, and you start your day with that, and it gives you a completely different center. I can tell when the days I don't do it.
1,000%.
When we leave it out, it's just crazy.
You stay before you look at your phone, before you put on the TV, before you go to your laptop.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, when we talked about energy drinks, and I was like, no energy drinks. Crazy. Deep breathing exercises every single day, multiple times a day, can increase energy, increase oxygenation, in fact, help with sleep. There are certain disease states and conditions like IBS and so on that can be, to some point, reduced just by the fact that you're taking deep breathing exercise and reducing your anxiety.
That's big.
Dude, it's insane. Well, one of the main drugs that they prescribe for IBS is, or no, I shouldn't say main, one of the drug protocols they prescribe for IBS, antidepressants. But think, deep breathing, peace of mind. Now you can do something that's free. You don't have to buy it. Well, I hope they never charge for air. Although they do have those oxygen bars, which I think is totally ridiculous when you can just do it yourself for free.
Right.
Deep breathing can make a huge difference in your day, your energy, your sleep, everything.